one thing I do remember I did differently, and it wasn't just for the Olympics, it was for, we had world championships every 3 years. And then we also, I think the hardest races were actually our internal national team races, when we would just kick the shit out of each other, all the girls that we were training with on the team. Because you knew, everybody knew your weak spots and you knew theirs. And so those were the hardest races. But those mornings, those hard peace mornings, I would look in the mirror and just kind of like self-affirmation, I guess now that I think about it. But it was just kind of something that just felt natural. It's just like, you got this.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lionheart Radio. We are currently in the beginning stages of summer, and it doesn't matter if you are a gym rat or a weekend warrior or an endurance athlete or some combination of all of them, kind of like myself. Everybody has one thing on their mind, and that is looking good naked. Everybody wants to look good and have some payoff for all of the hard work that they're doing behind the scenes. Everybody at Lionheart Radio is no different, from the host to the people that we have working behind the scenes. Now, if there is one thing that separates us apart, it's essentially the fact that we are not willing to sell you any bullshit. So what we've done is we've taken out the whole crash diet. We've saved you the 6 weeks to the next six-pack plan. And we've taken all of the knowledge that we have, collectively pooled it together, and put it in a document, a book, that you can download for free on lionheartrad.io. In that book, we have things that are going to help you get sustainably lean. We've got which workouts will help you burn more fat. We have tips on how to keep track of your daily calories and nutrition. And we've even got a glossary in the back with a list of movements and how you can plug them into your programming when you are looking for a desired result. Now, just like the show, everything is free. Go to lionheartrad.io and download your free ebook. As always, thank you for taking this journey with us. We will see you in the gym or at the beach. All right, welcome back to Lionheart Radio. I'm your host, Rick Alexander, founder of Lou Aviv in San Diego, California. And today I'm joined by multiple world champion, two-time Olympic gold medalist, and coach at Power Speed Endurance, Erin Cafaro MacKenzie. Thanks for being on.
Hey, Rick. Thanks.
So as we were talking pre-interview, as serendipity would have it, your husband's interview actually aired today with Brian MacKenzie.
Yep.
So for the listeners, and I think two-time Olympic gold medalist kind of speaks for itself, but for the listeners, can you kind of walk us through your athletic background, what got you into, being into fitness and into sports in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I guess I was the kid that never dreamed or even thought they could make it to the Olympics. So that wasn't even on my radar. I actually started out dancing. I did classical ballet for the first 12 years from 2 to 14, and got pretty competitive at that. And so I think, I have a lot to thank that discipline that taught me, and obviously, rhythm and flexibility. But that was my base. I was a dancer, and then, that got a little unhealthy as far as, just body image, and it was, I would say dancers are the most competitive athletes I've ever
Really?
been around. Oh yeah, it's brutal. So I actually was having fun. My brother always played every single sport growing up, baseball, football, whatever. And so I had fun throwing a ball with him, seeing how hard we could throw the ball, and the home run derby on the street. And so I got into softball. I think that was in around junior high. And then I picked up basketball, and I really, really liked basketball all through high school, but I was okay at it, but I wasn't great. I loved the sport. It was just fun to me. It was it was playing. And so when it came time to go to college, I really wanted to play in college, but I just didn't have what it took. And so I was looking around at colleges to walk on to.
For what? For basketball?
For basketball. Yeah. For basketball. Yeah. And, basically my dad suggested, he's like, there's this rowing thing that kids are getting scholarships for without any experience. Why don't you try that? And so I looked into it and started calling around in different colleges and just kind of, it was like cold calling,
Yeah.
being like, hey, I'm a kid from Modesto, California. I haven't taken a stroke in my life. Can I come to your school? And I got a lot of no's.
Sure.
It's actually kind of a funny story now because I know all the head coaches that were like, yeah, no, because I'm actually pretty short when it comes to rowers.
So then you must have been short for basketball as well.
Yeah, but I was a two guard, so I was all right. There's a spot for me.
Sure. Yeah.
On the basketball team. But rowing, especially with scholarship, like if they are going to give a scholarship, they're going to give it to a 6-foot something girl, and they aren't going to give it to a 5-foot nothing girl. So I fortunately, the novice coach Sarah Nevin at Cal Berkeley called me back and she invited me out to go into the launch, which is like the coach's boat. And yeah, I did a little mini tour and I loved it. And, I was so nervous that before, I heard that there's this 2K race or like that there's this 2K distance.
Mm-hmm.
I had nothing about rowing. And so I was like, oh, I should probably do a 2K before I like go watch practice, and so I did one, and they were all these high school girls were talking about their scores, and I was like, oh yeah, I pulled this like 8:45 for 2,000 meters, which
on the concept too.
The concept too, exactly. So that's kind of like the SAT of rowing, right? But yeah, the coach turned around and was like, never tell anybody that again.
Really?
Okay, got it. Yeah, because I guess she was just going off my past athletic experience, and that's not a score you want to shout from the hilltops. Basically, if you're on a competitive rowing team.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I should have done more research. But anyhow, so long story short, I think my my background was non-specialized, and I think that actually set me up really well for rowing. Rowing needs a lot of endurance. My basketball coaches made us do cross country in the off season, and it needs rhythm, it needs flexibility, and it needs competitiveness. And I had all of those from all the different sports and just my upbringing. So yeah, I guess that's the long and short of it.
Sure.
Of my non-specialized rowing background.
Yeah, what's interesting is we had Sarah Hendershot on as well.
And, nice.
And she talked about how one of the things that got her into rowing was the fact that she could go to college and row as well.
Yeah, well, it's probably number one on the list of parents, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, how do I get my kid into school, one, and then potentially paid for, two?
Right. So another parallel is that she talked about that she's kind of small for rowing as well. So she said the way that she made up for it was kind of just work ethic and hard work. And I'm kind of, what was your approach as far as coming in, being a smaller athlete and having to make that up? Yeah.
And I, Sarah is a fantastic rower and a great competitor for sure. And, I was there, the quad before her, and what I learned from those girls, because there's always there's token short girls, kind of like like on South Park.
Sure.
we're the tokens.
Okay.
But so you learn what they do, like how do these like outliers survive,
Mm-hmm.
And there was a girl that was actually was on Sarah's team on Princeton before, Leah Purnell, and she would outwork the shit out of anybody. Like, she could just grind and go after. She would just be doing extra all the time. Fortunately, I tried to do that. I broke myself a lot trying to play that game of outworking.
Yeah, because there's
everyone.
Definitely a law of diminishing return when it comes to
exactly.
volume.
Well,
right?
yeah. And I think if you are new to the sport, you kind of need some of those repetitions to get familiar with it. But at some point, you're just not recovering. You're already doing a full-on training program. And then in addition, if you're trying to do more than that, then that's where you kind of start crumbling. And so what my approach ended up being to actually get onto the 2008 team was to do things to stop following the leader per se. Mm-hmm. So stop following what people are doing and start feeling a little bit more and actually work on my own personal weaknesses. So for me, since I was smaller, it was strength. Like, how am I going to out muscle or, like out lever a 6'3", 200-pound girl? Like, it's just the law.
Right. It's just not, it's not going to happen. You just got to do it more power, happen. Essentially.
Yeah. So, so I just had to get smarter on how to use my body weight. Mm-hmm. And basically, my brother introduced me to CrossFit, and he met one of the first places he went was CrossFit San Francisco, or San Francisco CrossFit, I guess. And, Kelly, this guy by the name of Kelly Starrett was just one of the first, I think he was there like, one of the top 10, first 10 CrossFits. And he was a budding, PT student at the time. And he just took me under his wing and was like, girlfriend, you have no ass. We need to teach you how to squat. We need to teach you how to do a push-up. And we need to teach you how to do a pull-up. And that was the basics of it. Okay. Of like, I'm not going to try to tell you how to row. I'm going to try to teach you how to move,
mm-hmm. Yeah, how I understand it is the U.S., the rowing team had a very primitive outlook as far as like toward lifting at the time.
Yeah. And, the coaches, the rowing coaches are rowing coaches, and they know their sport very well. But there's, I think as humans, like if you do so many repetitions of the same movement, it's really hard to change that habit. Yeah. So you got to find another stimulus to, make a connection. And for me, it was using CrossFit and just doing something completely different outside of the boat rather than just trying to bang my head against the wall and try to change, something or try to be someone who I wasn't, which mm-hmm. was not 6'3", 200 pounds. So,
right. So when you started experimenting with these other things like CrossFit on the outside, and there started to be a crossover and like a real transition effect, did mm-hmm. it catch on, or were people still reluctant as far as lifting and adding in CrossFit to the rowing?
Well, it was kind of like a cowboy experiment. I don't know how else to explain it, but I was the only one doing it. It was kind of like a secret experiment, and it was crazy. Like, people are like, why the hell would you do that? Like, and it was more volume on top of our already full program. Again, like we would be doing at least, 20 to 30K a day of rowing. Well, actually 20 to 40K. But, it was a massive experiment. There was only a couple people that would, every now and then join me for something. But it was the fall of 2008, and everybody was kind of just scrambling and trying to figure out how to get on the freaking team. And so too many people weren't really worried about what I was doing until I started really doing well. Like I went from the bottom of the totem pole to I remember that spring there. I couldn't lose. And to be honest, I don't know if it was necessarily that I got stronger. I think I just became more aware of how to use my body weight, and even more so how to teach my partner or whoever was in the boat with me how to use their body weight more effectively. Because again, I'm not going to be able to outpower someone who's just designed like a freak of nature. Yeah, no, I think more than anything, that was like the first piece of me understanding how to be a coach and the power of using your body weight and using, not just concentrating on yourself, but whoever else is in the boat with you.
Yeah. So 20 to 40,000 K a day makes me want to puke on a rower. That sounds awful. How much training outside of that could you really get in as far as like CrossFit and stuff?
Oh, it would, some weeks it would be maybe one thing, Okay. Other weeks it would be, I would just set up like a little Cindy-like thing. It would be like push-ups, pull-ups, and air squats. My favorite go-to, actually, like a finisher after a workout, would always be just go into the gym that was above the boathouse and just do 1 minute handstand holds and 1 minute hollow rocks for 10 minutes. And it's like, that's CrossFit. I think what CrossFit is known for is like just crazy skull crushing workouts. But like, I think CrossFit, whatever, it's a word that can mean many different things. But how I interpreted it was filling your hole. And that was my hole. Like my hole was body weight awareness and just, strength. And it was either some body weight or just adding 5x5s or 5x3 deadlifts, just getting exposure to something completely different, stimulus that I hadn't gotten in the boat. So
is that approach of kind of just finding your weaknesses, finding a gap in your fitness and literally just working on that?
Totally.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, when you're doing that much volume, and I'm just assuming, but I would think your diet and stuff would have to really be dialed in order to reduce inflammation and really everything to reduce stress markers would really have to be very dialed in order to get away with doing that much volume and not breaking yourself.
Yeah, well, that pretty much was the difference between my 2008 quadrennium, is what, they call it, 4 years of training up to 2008, and then 2012. I think I could get away with a lot more shit. In 2008, I was, how old was I? I think I was like 23, 24.
Yeah.
I remember when we finally made the team, we were sponsored by like Kellogg's or, one of the cereal companies.
Oh, really?
And they sent us this whole box of like cereal, and we would just crush like cereal and I would be like, oh yeah, I'm totally paleo, but crush cereal on the side,
Right.
I think you just get away with shit when you're younger.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, after just wear and tear and on your body, 2012 era, I just couldn't get away with it. I just kept on breaking. I actually had to miss a world championships the year before 2012 because I had broken 2 ribs.
How do you break a rib? Really? Well,
you can feel it a mile away. It's basically, it's a stress fracture. So but like it starts out, simplified. It's basically your muscles are you're very tight, especially around your lat and subscap and all of that. And those are just glued down to your ribs, and then you're breathing hard. And so your ribs, or your lungs and diaphragm or everything are pushing on the inside, and there's nowhere for your ribs to go. And so they just take the stress and break. The fundamental reason that I believe is that, especially as a, shorter rower, your shoulder's out of position. So if you're reaching and any bit internal, you're just exposing all of those, that area that just gets so tight. You just, after how many strokes, thousands of strokes a day,
right.
No matter how much mobility you do, you can't undo it. So yeah, I think that's where I basically got a big kick in the ass of like, hey, you're going to have to change your technique and you're going to have to do something else, like change your diet, because you're breaking.
Sure. So what was what lifestyle factor, and maybe you alluded to it with diet, but what did you control the most that made the biggest impact as far as your recovery and things like that?
Starting to date my husband.
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah. Well, because he's on the cutting edge of all, like he's the one, I feel like he messes with stuff, finds out what works, and then everybody else kind of starts to adopt it.
Oh, he's such a good tinkerer.
Yeah. It
drives me nuts. But that's, I guess Kelly actually introduced us in 2010. And the first thing he said was, when I was actually injured, and he was like, hey, I have a buddy down there. He's gonna, review with you how to squat and push and pull again, but don't make out with him. And I was like, okay, whatever. So then he gave Brian the same thing. But yeah, he was like, you're introducing me to a coach. Like, I'm not going to make out with a freaking coach.
Right.
We had, semi kept in touch. He helped me out that day. I went to one of his seminars, but in 2012, I was coming back through for our Olympic training camp. I was driving from Northern California down to the Mexico border, basically where the training center is. And Brian lives in Orange County, and I called him up and I was like, hey, I'm coming through. I think, you'd probably kill me if I didn't come and stop and say hi. And so he was like, yeah, come over for dinner. And it was just weird. It was just kind of like, he wasn't a coach anymore. He was just a friend. And he, from then on, he actually moved out to Princeton with me for those next 6 months leading up to London, and literally put me under a microscope and gave me spoonfuls of coconut oil, would cook. He did my laundry. I mean, this is probably the side most people don't really know about Brian, but sure. Dude, he was a trooper. Yeah, he cooked what he wanted me to be fueled with, and it was predominantly shifting to a fat adapted diet. Not saying that I didn't eat carbs, because you can't take away chips and guacamole from me, but it was
so ketogenic diet. Fat. Okay.
No, because I was never in ketosis, because I mean we just had way too much volume, and rowing is 2,000 meters. It is a sprint, and so I don't think it actually is a sport that's really, if you're an ultra runner, fucking go for it, be ketogenic. But if you're a middle distance sprinter,
it's very demanding of that high output power.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're doing, 1 minute on, 1 minute off, type of things. And it's just, but yeah, we just became pretty much like meat eating vegetarians, with spoonfuls of coconut oil. That's all I can remember. It was, I don't know why. I don't mind coconut, but just a spoonful of it was gnarly.
Right. So you just increase fat uptake in order.
Increase fat. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And women kind of have a cheating way to tell if you are, if you're healthy or not. And that's, basically if you have your menstrual cycle. Mm-hmm. And it was weird. It was almost like a badge of honor, of like, oh, you're training so hard that you don't have your menstrual cycle. And when in fact, that's actually that's the biggest sign that you aren't recovering and that you aren't maximizing we're just, walking hormones basically, and especially if you're an athlete, you want all of your hormones to be working for you. Mm-hmm. And so once I upped my fat, lo and behold, I became healthy and got the menstrual cycle back. It might be TMI, but that was like, oh, okay. Like this is my kind of like test to know that I'm like recovering again.
Right. And your hormones are actually working how they should, right? Because that would be the biggest issue with not having it, is that it's not actually not having it. That's a symptom, but the problem is your actual hormone release.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So do you still eat that way, or has your thinking kind of evolved?
I think everything should come in waves, and I definitely became very like Nazi-like about my eating habits. That's not a PC word to use.
It's okay.
But very strict.
Okay.
Very strict with my eating habits. Yeah, I'm like 1/8 Jewish, so I can say that, I guess. So anyhow, but we moved up to Oregon a few months ago, and it's just fun. Like I feel like you can experience culture through food, and so I didn't want to like limit myself through it. I mean, I've really never drinking beer in my life, but I'm drinking beer now, and like there's freaking homemade sprouted bread, and I'm like, great, let's do it. And I also think it's interesting to just feel things. Like if you are so stuck on one way of eating, you almost forget what it feels like otherwise, and
sure.
And I also think sometimes you're easier to kill. If you're like, I'm allergic to this, I'm allergic to that. I'm like, I don't know if I want to live that way. Like I feel like it's and you know what, when we would travel for rowing, I knew that really we would have the choices would be limited, and we would have to eat a lot of like processed carbohydrates. So I would start introducing it to my diet before we would travel, so I wouldn't get sick while competing. But yeah, there's an optimal human diet, but if you can't be so sensitive that you have to eat a certain way all the time, else I think that gets into your lifestyle, you know?
Yeah. I think being dogmatic about anything is just not sustainable too. And if you do sustain it, you just kind of look like an elitist asshole. Just, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's something that even I think Brian alludes to in his new book, which is like, you have to be able to, you have to expose yourself to stresses, right? Otherwise you won't be able to deal with them, and you're inevitably in life going to deal with them. And I'm paraphrasing a lot here, but
yeah, no, that's pretty much what it says. And I totally agree with that. And I think that's like the trippiest part to me about, like, you know, everybody, and I think what my team and I accomplished at the Olympics was great. And it is amazing. It took a lot of freaking hard, gnarly days in a row to train for that. But I just can't, at the end of it, like after 2012, I just couldn't imagine doing another cycle, because I'm just like, I'm used to this stress, if that makes sense. Like, sure. I just felt like I just wasn't evolving. And so I think that not only is it important, you know, with food lifestyle, but it like also what your goals are in life. Like, you gotta constantly evolve if you want to grow. And it's okay if you don't want to grow too.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But that's the thing. I think, like, really evolving you have to level up and you have to grow, but that's relative to where you're at in life, right? Like, there's always comfortable, even if comfortable for you is, you know, nuts to somebody else.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's actually the biggest lesson that I've had to learn is actually being okay with where I am right now, you know, and like, because it was always like, you can do more, you can do better. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's never good enough. And it's like, that gets you to the top of the podium. But then what? You know, like, you still have those, you get onto the top of the podium and you know what you say? This isn't good enough. I want another one.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's just, I call it chasing dragons. It's this mystical creature that you're always going to be chasing after, and you can't catch it.
Yeah. And that's the problem too, I think, with really living for a result instead of a process, right? Because a result is so short-lived no matter how amazing of a result it is. So being dialed in and tuned in and like really enjoying that process, no matter what that looks like, I think is just a better recipe for, you know, being happy anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
It's actually kind of a good segue. One of the things Brian talked about was making huge life changes every 3 months in order to like really challenge his ways of thinking and grow. And I'm sure that every 3 months isn't like, hey, every 90 days we're fucking shit up around here.
Every day from his wife.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. I was going to say, like, what's your, I guess, kind of outlook on that philosophy? I thought it was cool.
And you know what the cool thing about that with him is that, like, I don't think it's a necessarily like conscious decision. I think he just feels things so well, and that's one of the things that I admire so much about him, is that he is so good at feeling and then also describing that feeling. And I think that's helped so many people, because he shares, you know, his experiences. And I think that is I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum of, I like to grind, and I don't mind suffering. Like, suffering doesn't feel, for the most part, like horrible to me. Or pain, I guess that might be a better way to describe it. Like, I'm not scared of pain, so I will ignore feeling and push through things a lot more than he will. So he doesn't like pain, and that's totally normal. But I guess that's the yin and yang. He is very sensitive, and with that, he has the superpower of evolving and adapting, and I am not as sensitive, and so I push through things at any cost. You know, my college rowing coach, my favorite quote is, he's like, yeah, Erin would row through a brick wall, and that's kind of how it is. But it doesn't, you know, that's that feels satisfying to me. Like I like feeling that's my feeling. Like I like to feel pain because then I know that's the threshold. Like sometimes I think that's why my athletic career was laden with injuries, because I like to know my limits almost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how much can I actually put up with? Like,
yeah,
if you're going to tell me to stop, I'm not going to stop. But if I have to because I'm broken, then okay, that's my limit.
Hey fam, I wanted to take a quick break from the show to talk to you about an experience that I had and also a product that I created out of that experience to solve a problem that I had. So for 4 years, I was an instructor at a military selection program. What that meant is that I would run and I would swim with the students, and then I would also do physical training. And I actually designed a lot of that physical training, and it was more of, CrossFit-y circuit, body weight type stuff, running, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, the normal calisthenics that you would see in the military. At that same time, I was also training for CrossFit myself, which means anybody who's ever tried to compete in CrossFit knows that getting really good at all of those different disciplines takes a lot more time than it looks like from the outside, maybe. At least it looked like for me. So once I got in, I realized, okay, I had to train 2 times a day or more in order to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Now, what that meant is I would have to train before work, then I would go to work and I would train with the students, and then after work, I would also train again for myself for my second session of the day. And of course, I tried to line them all up so that I wasn't just getting wrecked on all fronts, but that's a difficult thing to do. So for the most part, it was just a ton of volume, and it was really hard to recover. Now, in an attempt to recover, I started realizing, okay, I have to start making up for all of these different lifestyle factors like sleep and how I eat and my nutrition and my supplements. And so supplements was one of the first things that I went to. But I realized in order to get ready for the next workout, I had to eat, I had to take supplements that I couldn't, for things like creatine that I couldn't get from the food. And then on top of that, I was tired, so I had to drink coffee so I could get my mind right for the day, for the next workout. And it was really this like nightmare scenario where I was constantly trying to take things in just in order to stay even and feel okay going into the next thing. What I started to find is all of the supplements that I was taking off this shelf were chocked full of fillers. They either had things that I didn't want in them, or it didn't have enough of what I actually wanted in it. So I started researching all of these different supplements, and I started researching what was actually in the labels, and I realized all of these different fillers are chocked full of things like gluten that make me feel like shit. They would make me feel bloated, or essentially just, you don't want to have to recover from a recovery is what I found. I have enough fucking recovering in my life just trying to work out 2 or 3 times a day. So what I started doing is started sourcing and buying all of the raw materials myself for all of the products that I found had proven studies that were not backed by supplement companies. I mean, proven results like creatine. It helps with strength, endurance, recovery, and it's very studied. Very widely studied, I should say. So I started sourcing these materials, putting them together, and then taking them myself. So that way I knew exactly what I was putting in my body, and I knew that everything I put in my body was proven to work, at least on some level. And then I started giving it out to all my friends and all of my teammates that also worked out with me. And what I started to find is that there was starting to be a really big demand for this product. Now, giving it out, I realized that got to a point where I was working out 3 times a day, working in the middle of those times, and then I would get home at night and I would have to be in my garage and I'd be making all this product. So that just got really hard. So we eventually outsourced the manufacturing, and I told people, hey, you guys are going to have to pay me for this product if you continue to want it. And that's exactly what we did. So we outsourced manufacturing, we started calling it Lionheart Refuel, and we started selling it on a much bigger scale. So what you get in that is branched chain amino acids, glutamine, creatine. These are all things that have proven to help with the physical recovery. And then for that mental acuity piece, we put caffeine, ginseng, and guarana. Not a lot, not enough to make you buzzed, but just enough to make you kind of have that alert feeling and feel good going into the next workout. So it's nothing on the level of a pre-workout, but more of just a help lift you up once a difficult workout puts you in a mental deficit. So if you guys want to check that product out, you can go to www.lionheartrefuel.com and use code RADIO so that we know you're a listener of the show, and you'll get 10% off. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to this, and now we'll get back to the show. All right, thanks. Are you religious, or do you come from a religious background?
I was raised as a Catholic, holiday Catholic, pretty much. But my dad's very, very Catholic. And so I had, first baptism, first communion. But it never really resonated with me too much. But I don't know. I feel like my my religion is nature,
Mm-hmm.
and that sounds very hippie. Maybe Oregon's gotten to me, no, but I do believe in a higher power. I think you kind of have to stay humble, you
Mm.
know.
Sure. Yeah, and I know that sounds like a really weird question for the podcast, but the reason I'm asking is because I'm curious about. I'm always curious when you find people who have a really like an affinity to suffer, right? Because it's a quality that will make you a really good endurance athlete to a point. And I'm always just curious of what it is that's common among people that can suffer for a really long time. So
Hmm.
I don't know where that goes,
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's a really darn good reason why, like I think that to have this like belief that someone thinks that you are, infinitely capable and powerful, and just to feel like you always have someone on your side. Like I had a lot of teammates that were religious, and I almost was like, shit, I want that guy on my side too,
yeah, right, right,
So I can kind of see that of like, when you're getting low, you always are like, no, well, he believes in me, or and
right.
right. Basically, I mean, without getting too religious, because I'm sure this might be, it's always a touchy subject, but
Yeah.
I really think that the shift in believing that you actually hold the power, and that you, or not the power, I think that's actually the opposite word I wanted. I think that you are the strength. You are, it's not someone else. It's not someone else giving it to you. You create it. It's yours, and it's there for the taking. Like, it's not like, one person has more strength, or, whatever than the other. I think everybody has it within them, and that they're just so scared to almost own it, that they have to attribute it to another thing, or another cause, or a higher being.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. I'm just like that self-reliance kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you've been at the top of a sport, well, the very top of a sport. What is the biggest separating factor? Because there's a lot of people that would love to go to the Olympics, and I think what happens is the people that make it, they get a platform, and they tell people like, you should just follow your passion or whatever. And so it's really easy for people to step back and be like, Erin Cafaro's an Olympic gold medalist. Like, I want to be an Olympic gold medalist. What do you think the biggest separating factor between people that succeed in their sport and people that don't is, that you've seen?
I think it might have to do with passion, or it just might have to do with stubbornness.
Okay.
I think people who succeed are used to hearing no, and are okay with hearing no, and okay with failing. To be honest, that's the only thing that comes to mind of like, if there's something that gets in your way, that will set you off, and you're like, oh, this isn't for me. Well, then, yeah, no, it's not. But when you really want to achieve something, there's going to be a lot of no's, and there's going to be a lot of like, you shouldn't be doing this, or a lot of you can't. And that's just the difference between, I think, someone who, whether it's a sport, or, in business, or even in life, like, that just continues to go, whether other people believe in them or not.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you don't have self-doubt, because that is all too rampant.
Yeah, just part
But,
of it.
and I think that's actually that might be the biggest misnomer of them all, of like, people thinking that all of everybody's so self-confident, who achieve something great. And I think, and it, drives my husband nuts, because I'm always like, oh, I can't do this. Like, this is so hard. Like, I don't know. Like, well, I don't know if I'm going to do it. And then I just continue to do it. It's like, yeah, you actually probably still complain about it, but you wake up the next morning and you get after it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, to me, the biggest separator, is just continuing to go.
Yeah, so it's like the doubt's there, but at the same time, it's like you don't let it bring you down.
Yeah, like, you're still moving.
Right.
And then it's like, no, I shouldn't be moving, but I'm, like, no, stop moving, but you just keep moving.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of your life had to have been dedicated to the sport over the course of a decade or more. So when that sport ended, and I know you're into the power speed endurance thing now because you're a coach, and I know you had a lot to do with the setting up of the PSE Pro program launching. But I'm curious, what we could talk a little bit about what that transition was like to go from essentially pro athlete and this being everything in my life to kind of having to fill that void with other things.
Yeah, it was gnarly. And kind of like what we were talking about before of like, I wasn't used to any other stress besides training stress. And as amazing of an accomplishment as it was, like, I still got to take naps. I still got to I slept, 9 to 14 hours a day, and working and being an adult and adulting, you typically don't get those things. Naps and 3, plus meals and, at least 6 hours of sleep at night. And so that it just is a game changer. And I definitely have had some really good conversations with former teammates, and then also a lot of vets that have helped me through kind of the transition and just trying to find my groove again. And I don't know if I'm actually in a groove, but all I know is that I'm moving again. Whereas right after 2012 to I think right up into last year, like, there were days where I couldn't move at all. And it's just such a weird feeling. And whether, I think hormones have a lot to do with it for sure. You just, put your body through the ringer. But I think, there's also the piece of you're just being separated from your tribe and your purpose, and you have these new stresses and you don't know how to deal with it. But, yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And I think a lot of athletes are too, including myself, are scared to talk about it because it's like, oh, poor you. Like, you had to take naps and you had to go to like parties and, right, be the guest speaker and like whatever. But I think maybe if we look at it from a biological basis, like your body is a little fucked up after, and especially, from what I've seen with rowers, like, yeah, their bodies are beaten up afterwards, and it takes a toll on you mentally, for sure. Sure, you have little aches and pains, but I think the biggest piece is just mentally and internally, yeah. Something's going on in there, and I think that's something that I've been looking more and more into, and because I don't know how to help the next generation. And it's always my hesitancy. I actually have a really hard time encouraging people to go to the next level and go to the Olympics. And I've kind of separated myself from the rowing scene because I'm just like, God, I don't want anybody to go and feel like I did after. I would never wish that upon anyone. Sure, I would wish, someone getting a gold medal and getting, that feeling for sure. But I don't know if the trade-off, for me at least, my experience and the way I dealt with it, like that pain afterwards and whatever was going on with my body and still is going on with my body, I don't know if it was worth it. And I think it can be if there's a better transition solution.
Yeah. I think transition is a really hard thing for a lot of people. I think I'm kind of intimately familiar with this right now because I'm transitioning out of the military at the end of the year. And so I've gone through a couple programs and stuff, and it's just something that I'm realizing a lot of percentages of the population can deal with, because change management, it's a very complex thing. You have the physical aspect and the mental aspect, and there's a lot that goes into it, and it's scary,
Totally.
So have you found that, what have you found, I guess, that helps with the mental aspect of it? For example, and I don't really know because I haven't made the transition yet from the military, but one of the things that people talk about a lot is having a routine, having a habit. And I'm just curious, like having that morning routine, for example, will help keep you grounded, even though all these other things around you are shifted. I'm just curious if you found something like that.
Yeah, I bet that does.
Probably would help.
I've done a little bit of everything, to be honest. And I'm not someone that just changes from one fad to the next, but I've tried to eat again. Like, I tried to stay super clean. I tried to have a regimented day of like, you do this at 6 a.m., you do this at 7 a.m. None of that. Like, I feel like it's like an alcoholic going to cigarettes. You're just changing one addiction to the next. And yeah, we are, if anything, we are creatures of habit for sure. I think that is the most fundamental thing. Like we dislike change. We like comfort. And so I think it actually is just, for me, it has been finding a couple people to talk to and doing some meditation and almost just being and not having a schedule per se, but just being and like not having to do something or not having to be someone. I think that's been my most grounding thing for my transition, to be honest. And it's so hard because it's like we're so used to doing something. It's like, oh, you need to be here, or being told what to do,
Yeah.
And it's almost like being okay with like the silence and the and being like okay with yourself.
Yeah, it's just almost like letting go of that persona.
Mm-hmm.
So you're with, I know you had a lot to do. We even pushed this interview back a little bit because of the Power Speed Endurance Pro launch that you guys just did.
Yeah. It's kind of, that was a mini Olympics.
Yeah. So with, a product launch in a company I can attest to is hell. So we didn't talk too much about it with Brian when he was on. Do you want to talk a little bit about PSE Pro, like what it is and kind of what your role is?
Yeah, for sure. So PSE is a acronym for Power Speed Endurance, and it's the name of Brian's first book, actually, and it's basically going over the fundamentals of movement of sports, and some of the basic sports like running, biking, swimming, rowing, and it's just treating, it's basically giving you a guide on how to perform a sport and efficiently and effectively. And what we see in those sports is a lot of injury, and everybody, again, here's the repetition thing. Everybody, wants the repetitions, which is fine. But what is missing in a lot of, I guess not just sport, but a lot of skill is, or a lot of things is actual skill. And so here is he's laid out, here's the skill of this sport, so you have a good foundation. And that's pretty much what we've carried on and carried through with Power Speed Endurance, is just providing a guide for skill for sports. And so now, as a rower, I actually learn the most from Olympic lifting coaches and from running coach like Brian and from Kelly, who knew nothing about the sport. And so I think what we're doing here is actually bringing together some top minds in the sport, and we're providing guides for, a program for that sport, but also these coaches are coming together and talking about what works in their sport and what doesn't, and learning from other sports. And so that's, I think, one of the coolest parts of it is that it's not just, we aren't just stuck in tradition. Like, of course, we have a good basis of fundamentals and principles because that's, the foundation for everything. But we always want to evolve our thinking and be open to learning from other sports and from our athletes and from other coaches. So long story short, it's programming, but it's more of like a guide and a constantly evolving guide, because we're always learning more about how to move a little bit better. But I think this is a beast that's going to continue to evolve. And I don't even know how it's kind of funny. It's almost like the rowing. I never really dreamed of being in charge of a operating company. It just kind of happened, and it's happening. And it's, there's obviously probably would have been easier if I went to business school.
Sure.
And all of that. But I think there's something that Brian and I both agree on very fundamentally that we need to share this information with athletes so that they aren't, continually running into walls. And like I did, in rowing, like trying to follow someone else's program because I thought that's what just rowers did. I thought you just worked hard and that was it. And it's like, oh no, you can actually like work on your skill and, become a well-rounded athlete, and that will help you become a better rower. Like what? And so it's just providing solutions that's a little bit alternative to the typical sport solution.
So if I went on there and I found like PSE, the swim program, for example, it's not a templated program, right? It's like, what am I actually getting?
Yeah. So there's a daily program, and every cycle. So we do like a 9-week cycle, active recovery. And so there is 3 days of strength and conditioning that is targeted for that sport. Okay. So, say for rowers, we're really going to work on developing that posterior, your backside, because you're sitting on your ass all day, and it actually, you're in flexion a lot. And so we need to develop a stronger posterior. And so it's just honing in. It's kind of like what you were mentioning with Sarah of like, that the strength and conditioning for rowing is a little ancient still. And it's like, no, well, it doesn't have to be. Just take the fundamentals of the sport and, apply some basic strength and conditioning principles to it. So that's 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, strength and conditioning. And then Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday is a mix of intervals and just a stamina session. So, and you can go for, it's like the CrossFit endurance model, except for a little bit more in depth.
Okay.
So you'll find, I think what CrossFit endurance was before was just intervals and, some strength and conditioning, but it was mostly like, here's some intervals to try out, and to add to your CrossFit. Well, we're giving actual sport athletes ideas for strength and conditioning now, while also, we still have a good CrossFit contingent that comes to us to help round out their program.
So
with sport side.
To have that many sport specific, you guys must have just been sitting there writing out programming, a shitload of programming to have that much in-depth sport specific type programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're trying to find, speaking of efficiency, we're trying to find the, another efficient way of entering this all in and providing and sharing it with everyone. But right now it's worth it because from what we, if someone actually is doing the program, they feel a difference. And, that's what makes it all worth it at the end of the day, is that if you're actually helping someone realize that they can do the sport they love, like especially runners, like that's the biggest one we see is like, I thought I was told I can't run another day in my life, and they come and do our programming and, and they are like, I'm running again. This is great.
Yeah.
And it's like, we all need to move. And so here's options on how to continue to move and play and do what you love. So who knows, we're always evolving, but right now we're really playing around with the breathing aspect and preparation for your sport through breathing, not just warming up the muscular system, and I think that's something that's profound. It's like, well, why not? Yeah. Like, why didn't we think of this before?
Yeah. I'm doing it right now, actually. Since the Brian interview, I've been adding in these breathing techniques, and I'm like addicted to it.
Good. Yeah, no. And, the biggest thing is do you feel a difference? We don't want to sell a program just to be like, this is the best program ever. I think everybody feels something different. And everybody's looking for something different out of their movement practice or even out of their life. And so this is just our solution to help people, train for something. And, for me, like I know the volume program works. but where it put me, mentally and physically and hormonally afterwards, like I don't, again, I don't wish that upon anyone. So
Yeah.
here's a, I have a rowing program that I'm trying to get out to, high schoolers, college kids, as much as I can, because I just, it pains me to see how much volume they think is necessary for a 2,000 meter sport.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's got to be a fine line between systematizing that process that you have and sacrificing quality, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So the Lionheart kicker is the final question. We ask it to all of our guests, or at least we try to. And the question is, based on everything that you've done so far, all the experience that you've gotten with the Olympics, with being a coach, with everything, school, if you could give advice and it was guaranteed that everybody in the world would hear it, and it would be translated to every language, they might not all follow it, but they would definitely hear what you said. What would you tell people?
Don't try to be the superstar.
What do you mean by that?
I think that by using your team and supporting people around you, you will go faster than you ever could on your own. And I think a lot of people just try to constantly self-improve, which is great because it will, you'll be more valuable player to the team, but you will never go any faster or any stronger than the team around you. So I think, don't try to be the superstar, just boost everyone up around you.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of that mentality of like just trying to make yourself more useful.
Yeah. And so it's like you're just a piece of the team. Maybe I'm like brainwashed from being a rower, but it really is nailed into us. That's like, if you think you can go fast, sure, go sit in a single by yourself. And even then, like, you're going to need a coach, you're going to need training partners, whatever. Like you're never going to go fast or do whatever you want to do just by yourself. You can do 10 times more if you just boost, if you're part of a team and you boost them up too.
Yeah.
Bring them along.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice. I like it. Erin, thanks for being on today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, buddy. Thanks, Rick.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track in delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcome. If you have any comments on the show or would like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke, white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshit. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest.